Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Good evening, young man. How are you?
Mr. Roy Cavanagh, no other than. Not quite a sir, but you are a member of the British Empire. Please tell me about Dennis Viollet.
Well, I have to say, and it's quite sad really, because yesterday the world lost a brilliant footballer in Ray Kennedy.
Yes.
And when you seriously look last night, I mean, I saw Kennedy play, of course, for Arsenal and Liverpool. But when you look last night and saw his honours, the double for the Arsenal, 3 European Cups, was it for Liverpool?
Yes,
So many titles, Europa Cup or Fairs Cup, whatever, League Cup. And yet, under the radar, except for everyone who saw or played alongside him. And I think in the star-studded Parthenon of the Busby Babes, Dennis Viollet is right at the top.
Yeah.
Because I get asked a lot about Duncan Edwards. And of course, I saw Duncan from very, very young age, youth team football. And he was magnificent. But sadly, Duncan's career was from 16, was 5 years.
Yeah.
And Dennis Viollet had a career which not only graced Manchester United and helped the Busby Babes be who they were, he revitalised Stoke. He kick-started football in America.
Yeah.
And I had a most wonderful life. And it was a real honour to write the book with him, with Brian Hughes, who's also an MBE, the brilliant boxing trainer, who sadly isn't too well these days, but a man who had stories before stories was even invented. But I can't exaggerate enough how great a footballer Dennis Viollet was.
Now, Dennis Sydney Viollet, where did the Sydney come from? Is it the Australia Association?
Well,
born in September, 20 September 1933.
Yeah, and because I don't think it was spelt the English way, was it?
No, it's spelled as Sydney, Australia.
As in Australia. So they must have been... he actually was born and lived very close to Main Road.
Is that Fallowfield where he was born?
Yeah, Moss Side, Fallowfield, round there. He was very close to Main Road. And the story goes, and this came from Frank Swift, the late, great Frank Swift. Frank Swift knew he was having a trial with City. And Dennis went with his father, and he was met at the door, and he was asked to wait in a corridor, and nobody came for him. And his father said, "We're not staying here. Come on, we're going home." He went home, and Frank Swift heard about that and told his great friend Matt Busby, and Matt invited him to United, and the rest was history.
Now, his goal-scoring record for United in league games alone, from 53 to 62, 293 league games, 159 league goals. I think it's 179 in all competitions. Now, that stands up really well with who is perceived as the king of Old Trafford, Dennis Law. The only difference is there's 2 N's in Dennis Violet's Dennis and 1 in Dennis Law. But even Dennis talks so highly of Dennis Viollet, and it's almost as though Dennis Viollet is the forgotten forward of Manchester United, and that just doesn't seem right.
No, well, I think that the point to make on that, Paul, is that if you take, and I should know this off by heart, I'm 99% certain it's the 1959-60 season. He scored 32 league goals.
Yeah.
Now, that was a 42 league season, but he only played about 36 games.
He missed the last 5 games, didn't he?
So he got his 32 goals. Now, since that season, which is 61 years on, 62 next year.
Yeah.
There hasn't been another Manchester United footballer score as many goals in the league as that. And as you rightly say, the next one after that, Dennis Viollet came in 62. You've had all them forwards right up to the Rooneys of this world. The great goal scorers, Ronaldo, 2 terms or 2 and a bit terms, 1 and a bit terms, sorry. And none of them have got that 32 league goals in a season. That just tells the story, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And he was on the plane, wasn't he, that sadly crashed in Munich. Now, is my understanding correct? Did I read it or did I view it on a YouTube clip somewhere? That Dennis was sitting next to Bobby Charlton and both of their chairs ended up their seats on the icy runway after the plane had crashed?
Yes. Now, Dennis told us from America, because we were communicating with him in America.
Yeah.
Where, of course, is Rachel, who I'll just briefly mention later on, because I want to make a point about Rachel as well. But Dennis said that when they were, in those days, of course, Paul, when they played a game in Europe on a Wednesday, teams went on a Monday.
Yeah.
So because flying was still not like Uncadori, like it should be today, COVID accepted, and the trip to Belgrade was 3 hours to Munich for a stopover going, and then another 3 hours to Belgrade. And, nowadays you'd fly direct to Belgrade in under 3 hours, I would suspect. Yeah. But he said he was genuinely shocked when they, on the Tuesday, they went for a walk around and there was snow around. He said, but the shops, the foods and that, the shops were empty of food. And he said people were walking around and they'd actually reused old tyres and were using them to walk on as shoes. He said it was really depressing. He said if that was communism, they could keep it, because obviously Tito was in full regalia around them, and he was genuinely shocked. And the floor the team stayed on in Belgrade, he said there were troops, protecting as well, but troops on that floor. Dennis played in the game, and in fact scored a goal. I think Bobby got 2. Sadly, what happened the day after? There is an interesting postscript to that, because Dennis actually died in the
99.
80s, 90s.
Yeah, 6th of March 1999. He sadly passed away.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that there was the comment done by a very good, even though he followed the city, Manchester City, guy called Paul Ince, Hince, played a bit of football for City as well, and 1 or 2 other clubs. But he reported on City in the Manchester paper. And when our book came out and Dennis had died, he made the very interesting point that it said that there were 8 people who died in the air crash, 8 footballers, who died in the air. Was Dennis Viollet the 9th? Because Dennis, all he suffered was a cut and a bruising on his head near his eye. And that under that was where there was a tumour, really? Which he died of. And of course, being a great reporter, Paul Ince managed to manufacture that into, the unwritten question, really, of whether or not, was he another person who died from his wounds of the crash?
Wow.
Which is, was quite eerie, really, writing it.
Absolutely. How come he played for Witton Albion in 1969? What's the story? And then Linfield in 69-70 as well.
Yeah, well, of course, when he finally finished with Stoke, and before he went to America, he dropped down to Witton, and I'm not sure if he was player manager or not there, actually.
Yeah, got it.
think he was player manager there. And Linfield, of course, again, he was very, very friendly with Harry Gregg.
Yes.
Very good mates with Gregg. And of course, I think all this was just before they decided to go to live in the States. And of course, Rachel Viollet is of Dennis's second wife of that marriage.
Yeah.
He had 4 children from his first marriage who are still around the Manchester area. But Rachel herself, of course, became a brilliant tennis player.
Right.
And she learned the tennis, of course, in the States. And she was at one stage, she was in the top 1 or 2 of Britain's lady tennis players.
Right.
She was that good.
She's also good at making films, and she wrote.
Yes,
she made
she is. She's doing
it
this
was
one.
A United Man, wasn't it? The
Yes.
title, and I think that's a great play on words, because Man United, a United Man, and he was pretty much a United Man. Before Munich and after Munich, did it? Because like Bobby Charlton famously has never really spoken about the air disaster. Did it change Dennis mentally as well and physically? How did United recover from that Munich air disaster? Because he was really pivotal in the rebirth, if you like, of United, wasn't he, Dennis Viollet?
Very, very much so. In fact, he became club captain after Billy Foulkes. It became too much for Billy Foulkes. I mean, Billy was captain straight after Munich, that first game of Sheffield Wednesday. But in the following season, Matt felt that the whole pressures and the impact was hitting players like Billy, the responsibility, and he took the captaincy off him, agreeable with Billy. And Dennis became the captain as well. Dennis was a man before his time, and I think that's why a lot of the players who, not massively young, but say Dennis was 25, you Coleman and Edwards, at 21, and Bobby Charlton, they'd be looking up to, and Billy Whelan and people like that. They'd be looking up to Dennis because he was a very, 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 very worldly man. Dennis. A snappy dresser of the time, immaculate in his grooming, the cigarette in his hand, done very like a film star would, knew the right clubs in Manchester to go to, so where the younger ones might be going to the Jive and whatever clubs, Dennis would be going to the mature proper nightclub situation, a real man about town in a way. I think possibly, that was one of the reasons, I think in the end by about 60, 61, I think Matt was a bit fearful, a bit like Fergie said about Ince, was he a bit too much of an influence? And Dennis was certainly an influence. Whether Matt felt, he wanted to make that change. I can tell you, though, it was a big shock to Dennis because he told me that, I think it was January 1961, ish, or 62. Can't remember now. It was either January 61.
62 when he went to Stoke.
Yeah, 62. Sat at home Sunday night, gets a phone call. Hi, Dennis, it's Tony Waddington here, who actually played for United before the war, by the way.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And Tony was a good wheelie dealer, wasn't he? I mean, look at the players Stoke had.
Yeah. He loved an inside forward as well.
With Matthews.
Yeah.
Jackie Moody, Jimmy McElroy, what a player.
Yeah.
Eddie Clamp.
Yeah.
Stewart. Was it Eddie Stewart from Wolves, them two? And then later, Peter Dobin, Roy Vernon, Maurice Setters, David Hurd, Harry Gregg,
Alan
all
Hudson.
Those people.
Yeah,
And of
George
course,
Easton.
George Easton. And Dennis Viollet was one of the early ones after Stanley Matthews, who also rated Dennis very, very highly. But Dennis gets his phone call on a Sunday night in 1962, January. Hi, Dennis, Tony Waddington. Would you like a meeting? Matt's given me permission to speak to you. We've agreed a fee. I'd like you to come and join me at Stoke. And Dennis was shocked. He knew nothing of it. And he said, can I ring you back another half hour, Mr. Waddington? Yeah, of course you can. And he rang Matt Busby on a Sunday night and said, Matt, just had a phone call from Tony Waddington. And Matt said, oh, yeah, I've got a lot on a minute, Denny. I'm sorry, I should have let you know, and I've agreed. And Stoke actually offered to pay him more money than he was getting at United.
Yeah.
And he accepted it. And he became a legend in Stoke. And in fact, I think there's a street or a close named after him in Stoke, Violet Close or Violet Street. And he was there about 5 years, but he got on promotion along with Matthews into the First Division. And as I say, he was lauded there. But it was a little bit sad how it ended at United.
Yeah, it is, because as I say, all intents and purposes, he was an absolute legend, someone that the players looked up, and you could argue, I guess, the original George Best before George come, he was the boy about town then, wasn't he? In the 50s.
Well, George had joined the club while Dennis was still there.
Right, okay.
Junior level.
Yeah.
So Dennis would have met him or seen him. And when you think, of course, he'd been in the team that had before Edwards and Charlton, and saw all them babes mature alongside him, and then saw George, and then himself played in the same side as Stanley Matthews, and then went to America and was involved with Pele with the football.
Oh, he was indelible, wasn't he, with the development in the NASL.
And one or two good Brummies as well there. Freddie Goodwin was involved over there, wasn't he?
Again, Freddie was a Busby babe, wasn't he? And manager of my team, Birmingham City. And football just is that link. It's almost like passing the baton on. And we're going to have to pass that baton back on to Terry Curran. So can I thank you, Roy, so much for your time, sir. Again, you've educated me. On part 3 of Book Corner, will you be my author of the week? I'll give you a call and you can tell us all about the wonderful new book, Manchester United of the 70s, that you've written with your good mate, Mr. Abbott.
It'd be my pleasure, and thank you for the pleasure of speaking to you again. You take care.
Sir, you are a gentleman, you are a member of the British Empire, but most importantly, you're a friend. Thank you so much.
I was just going to say, I'm your mate. Okay, you take care. Take care.
Cheers, Roy. Thanks, pal. Bye.